is needed to prevent serious harm to a woman's health. And that was the issue. Idaho had passed, as you said, one of the most restrictive laws banning abortion in the country after the justices overturned Roe versus Wade 2 years ago. It allowed abortions only to save a mother's life and in cases of rape or incest. The Biden administration sued. They pointed to a federal law that guarantees emergency room care, stabilizing care for patients. And they said that care could include abortions when a mother was facing serious health complications. Idaho law, only abortions where the life is at stake. So they said there was a conflict. The federal judge below said, yes, there is a conflict, and the federal law trumps this Idaho law, and he put it on hold. So today, we're back there. The Idaho law is on hold. Those abortions can resume in the state of Idaho, and Idaho is one of 6 states with these kind of bans. So this case goes beyond Idaho potentially as well.
But just to remind the real world situation, let's say you are a pregnant woman, you are having a miscarriage, you go into the emergency room in Idaho, and doctors there, OBGYNs, wrote in a letter as part of this filing to the Supreme Court, they were concerned that they could be prosecuted if they gave an abortion to this woman who had had a miscarriage, unless it was to save the life of the mother, that legal distinction. The question was, what about the health of the mother? What if this threatens her health and fertility in the future? And Associated Press had pointed out that because of this concern by doctors, 6 patients had been medevaced out of the state of Idaho in order to get care. So the real world effect today is what for pregnant women if they believe and their doctors believe their health is at risk?
Under what the court has done today, those abortions should be able to resume in Idaho. But you're absolutely right. And we've spoken to so many doctors about this, and doctors who are there on the ground in Idaho. And they're grateful. I mean, we talked to one yesterday who said she was grateful that the court has kind of restored the status quo, but there's still confusion. There's still fear. This is a felony in Idaho that doctors could be facing if they run afoul of this Idaho law. So while, yes, there may be some relief that it's resorted back to the status quo, the abortions can resume in these medical emergencies, that's still a lot of uncertainty there in that state. And I will say, 1 in 5 OBs have left the state of Idaho since the court overturned Roe
That's
versus
right,
Wade.
22%. Idaho has lost 22% of their OBGYNs because those doctors say, I don't want to deal with the legal issues. So that has affected general care for women in the state of Idaho.
The legal issues and the threats, the repercussions of laws like this, the uncertainty about what you can and cannot do, what care can be provided, all of these come, Nora, in an atmosphere of great uncertainty. And when the court took this case up, it created 6 months of this actual law taking effect and 6 women's lives being materially disrupted. And when the court took it up, it said, we'll decide this case on the merits. As Jan will tell the audience, it is not deciding this case on the merits. It's not deciding whether this 1986 federal law universally protects care that stabilizes the health of a woman in distress. It does not. This means this will come back, and to put this in a political context, Nora, we have a debate tonight between 2 presidential candidates. And the last time they met, Joe Biden said abortion is on the ballot. Donald Trump said, what do you mean abortion's on the ballot? And Joe Biden said abortion rights in this country will be affected in the future. They are now. They're on the ballot in every state in the country. And this conversation will continue with long-lasting political effects.
Because this would not be an issue before the Supreme Court had not the Biden administration sued the state of Idaho.
Right.
And had the Supreme Court not issued the Dobbs opinion.
I have to say, again, I'm going through some of these opinions. It is an unusual coalition of justices. You have 2 liberals, Justice Kagan and Justice Sotomayor, and then you have the Chief Justice, Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Brett Kavanaugh coming together to dismiss this case, which then, as we said, restores the status quo, allows these abortions to resume. But Justice Barrett, in her opinion, emphasizes that when they took the case, the law looked very different. In that interim, the Idaho Supreme Court has weighed in, the legislature has weighed in, and they have said in Idaho, these kind of abortions for serious medical emergencies are allowed even under the Idaho law. So they've given this guidance. Justice Barrett is saying the case has changed. We need to have this go back to the lower courts. But again, to Nora's, your point, the doctors still feel right now tremendous uncertainty.
I want to bring in Jessica Levinson, our CBS News legal contributor and also a Loyola Law School professor. Jessica, it is so good to have you. This one is interesting, as we have just been talking about. Why is it unsigned, and why did Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson write a partial dissent?
So per curiam means it's from the court. And what Justice Jackson said is, I'm ready to decide. She said, why are we sending this back down? I'm looking at a federal law, and the federal law says stabilizing treatment, and that includes life or health. And I'm looking at a state law, and the state law says only abortions for life. And what she's saying is there's a difference there, life and health versus life. That's a conflict. And she's saying, I'm looking at the supremacy clause in the Constitution. There's so many complicated constitutional questions, but this isn't one of them. When you have a federal law and a state law and they conflict, then the federal law wins. So I think that's what she's saying legally. I think she's also frustrated because, well, I believe that Justice Barrett is correct, that things changed since they took the case. Idaho said their exception is broader, and the federal government, frankly, I think also said their mandate is narrower. So that daylight arguably did collapse a bit between the two laws. But I don't think Justice Jackson wants to send this back down. She says, I'm ready. This was briefed. Let's go. And that's why we have this separate concurring dissenting opinion from her.
I mean,
It
this is so
fiery,
fascinating.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
Jessica is absolutely right. I mean, it is fiery. I mean, she says today's decision is not a victory for pregnant patients in Idaho. It is delay. And then she goes on to say the court had a chance to bring clarity and certainty to this tragic situation, and we have squandered it. So she is alone in saying that. You do have the three conservatives, some of the most conservative justices, kind of agreeing with her on one point. Yeah, we should have decided this today. We don't want to dismiss it, but they would have ruled for Idaho. So like we said, we have those five who are saying we're going to dismiss it. As Jessica discussed, Justice Jackson's like, no, we're ready. Let's go. We need to decide this now. This is just more delay. And then you have the three conservatives saying we need to decide this now, too, because we think Idaho's law is perfectly fine.
Once again, a reminder that abortion rights, reproductive rights, not only an issue in state races, in legislatures, but also before the Supreme Court as people still deal with the overturning of Roe versus Wade 2 years ago.
And this is the first case for the court to look at a state ban criminalizing abortion. This is the first one they've had since they overturned Roe versus Wade.
And when the court decided, Dobbs, overturning Roe versus Wade, it said states will be laboratories and they will experiment. Well, those in Idaho who oppose abortion rights wrote this law, and as soon as it was scrutinized, as soon as it became clear what the ramifications of it were, they began to backpedal under legal pressure and the visibility of what the implications of that law actually were. So this laboratory idea, yes, it's playing out, but trapped in the middle of that laboratory experimentation are women who have pronounced medical concerns, health risks, and they don't know where to go, and doctors don't know how to intervene.
Who fear prosecution. Jen, I do want to ask you, too, because, well, tonight we'll be watching and covering here on CBS that presidential debate. We have more decisions coming tomorrow from the Supreme Court, important decisions.
Yes, I mean, today's case, of course, one of several major decisions that we have been waiting on, including two involving former President Trump. One, whether he is immune from prosecution for his actions around January 6th and efforts to interfere with the 2020 election. And then if he's not immune, what can he be prosecuted for? Those are major questions that the court is poised to resolve either tomorrow or perhaps sometime next week that will have a direct impact on Special Counsel Jack Smith and whether he can bring this case to trial before the election.
Important news from here in Washington. Just to remind everybody, once again, the breaking news from the Supreme Court. The justices ruled that emergency abortions are allowed in Idaho in rare cases to protect a woman's health. And of course, this will have implications in the 5 other states that have this near total ban. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News. And as I mentioned, we're going to see you tonight for coverage of that presidential debate and where we can expect to hear from the candidates on these very important issues. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Norah O'Donnell.
And resulted in the decision